is the Environment Secretary, Steve Reed. Good morning to you. Appreciate you're on a beach
morning,
there,
Matt.
and we're going to talk about water in a second, but it would be rude not to just pick up on what Ashish was saying there, Steve Reed, about the NHS. Is this more about the optics when perhaps there isn't enough investment in sorting out social care at the other end of the pipe?
Oh, absolutely not. When we inherited an appalling situation with record waiting lists in our National Health Service, it was scandalous that people were waiting months and sometimes years to be seen for conditions that needed much faster treatment. So, thanks to the work that Wes Streeting has been leading in that department and the investment that was allocated at the last budget, we've already cut waiting lists by 200,000. That is a significant improvement. We know we need to go further. So the announcement today, £450,000, again, allocated in the budget last autumn, that will go to help open up these new emergency care and urgent treatment centres, 40 of them up and down the country, that will mean around 800,000 people will be seen faster, as Wes was saying. You can't fix everything overnight. I'm standing here on a beach in Portsmouth to talk about water pollution in a moment. You can't fix that overnight, but we're taking steps in all of the areas that were of concern to the public as part of our government's plan for change to fix those problems for the long term.
Yeah, one of those things is from today, you are stopping 6 water company bosses from getting their bonuses. But as we've seen in the past with the likes of the banking crisis, what's to stop them just getting a basic salary pay rise from their paymasters instead?
Well, the problem was, you'll remember the last general election, the state of our waterways was an absolute scandal. We are furious that we ended up with record levels of pollution in our rivers, lakes and seas. Behind me, I'm on the beach of Portsmouth. There's a notice just here telling people not to go in the water because of the poor water quality, the levels of pollution that are in it. Despite that happening over the last decade, the water company bosses responsible for those businesses have given themselves over £100 million in bonuses. Well, the era of profiting from pollution comes to an end with this government. So this morning, we're announcing a ban on the bonuses for 6 of those water company chief executives. That's 2/3 of all of the companies no longer receiving their bonuses. That is what we said we'd do during the general election. That's what we're doing today. Promise made, promise delivered.
Let's talk about Thames Water in particular, because water is still privatised, which means you still need private money, private capital. And earlier in the week, KKR, the American investors, pulled out of injecting much-needed cash into Thames, basically because they're worried about government meddling. While things are still privatised, you need that private money into our water system, don't you? Otherwise, it's all going to go bankrupt and we'll all be stuck.
Well, the truth is, we've just secured £104 billion of private sector investment to help fix our broken water infrastructure. That means mending those sewage pipes that are leaking sewage into our rivers. It means fixing those pipes that are leaking, causing water outages up and down the country. £104 billion private sector investment is the single biggest investment in the history of our water sector in this country. And during the lifetime of this parliament, it's the second biggest investment anywhere in the economy. So I'm afraid that doesn't stack up with what you're saying about investment. Of course, we want to attract more investors as partners into the water sector. That's why I've got Sir John Cunliffe looking at a reform of regulation so we can modernise the system. It needs to work better for customers. It needs to work better for the environment, clearly. But we also want it to be an attractive sector for investors, because that's how we bring in the money that will fix the pipes that are causing the problem.
I spoke to Sir John earlier in the week here on Breakfast, but also spoke to Fergal Sharkey, who's a prominent water campaigner. He's saying the system is just broken. It doesn't work. Now, a lot of people would like to see it renationalised, which, of course, would be hugely expensive. But as things stand, it's just broken and is not working for people who are paying for it.
Well, yes, I agree with Fergal. The system's completely broken. That's why we're taking the action that we're taking. So
but
record levels of enforcement.
It can't be remedied, was the point. The system as it stands is beyond remedy. It's going to need...
That's why we're completely resetting it. So I've got 81 prosecutions underway, criminal prosecutions into water companies right now. That is a record number going on to try and stop what they're doing around the problems with pollution. We've brought in that record £104 billion investment the biggest investment in our water sector in its history, start to fix those broken sewage pipes. We'll cut pollution in half
you're not upset
within
about
5 years
KKR
with
pulling
that
out of Thames
investment.
Water then? You're not upset about KKR deciding it's not worth looking at?
Well, it's for Thames. I know Thames creditors are working on a solution to bring in the equity that they need. It's a private company, and it's for them and not the government to resolve that. KKR chose to pull out. There are other options on the table for Thames, but clearly this is an attractive sector to invest in, or we wouldn't have secured that £104 billion investment. As I said earlier on, it is a record, but the system is broken. We're cracking down with much tougher enforcement. We're bringing in that £104 billion worth of investment, and we are modernising the rules. I've got a commission underway right now under Sir John Cunliffe. They reported last week with an interim report on how they think regulation and the regulator needs to change. I'll have the final report of that next month. We will then bring in a law that will completely reset regulation, so the failures that led to the kind of pollution you've got in the water behind me can never happen again.
And Steve Reed, will you have the money your department needs next Wednesday in the spending review from the Chancellor? Has she promised you that?
I'm confident that we will have a good settlement. We have to wait until next Wednesday to see what the Chancellor announces in the spending review. It'd be very wrong of me to stand here on this speech and anticipate that.
Yeah, well, let's say it with a smile on your face, so we'll wait and see whether you get what you need for the department. Look, 2 minutes left and 2 more questions to ask you about other things. Firstly, the Hamilton by-election, a fairly surprising win for Scottish Labour there last night. Your reaction?
Well, congratulations to Davy Russell. I think he's going to make a fantastic MSP up there in Scotland. I think what's gone on there is that last July, the people of Scotland voted for change. Clearly, Labour won many of the parliamentary seats in Scotland because people wanted to see change. They're not getting it in Scotland because they're stuck with an SNP government. So a moment ago, we were talking about that investment that the UK government is putting in to reduce waiting lists for the NHS in England. They've gone down by 200,000. But in Scotland, 1 in every 6 Scottish people is on a waiting list because the SNP are not managing the NHS properly. So people are voting for positive change. They voted for Labour and they voted for Davy Russell as their new MSP. We've got the Scottish elections next year. We'll see how that works. We'll fight for every vote, but this is a very, very positive outcome, and I congratulate our candidate.
I appreciate we've danced around the issues a little bit more, but if you'll forgive me one more, Steve Reed, I want to talk to you about Ukraine. We've seen this morning 4 people reportedly killed in Kyiv and 20 injured after an attack by Russia overnight. However, my colleague Yalda Hakim has been speaking to the Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kelin, and he's effectively accusing the UK of having more involvement in what Ukraine is doing than perhaps we realise. Let me just spell this out for you. He's talking about a very high-tech thing called geospace data, which only the US and the UK possess. President Trump has definitely said that it's not being used to help Ukraine, not that they necessarily believe that, but it hasn't been confirmed or denied by London. Are we providing Ukraine with geospace data to affect attacks like they did on those aircraft in Russia and also the Crimean Bridge, which is what Russia claims?
Well, I'm afraid that's not something that I can give you an answer to because I don't know the answer to that. I know that we, as a government, cross-party actually, are standing four square alongside Ukraine as they try to defend themselves against a brutal, unprovoked and illegal attack and invasion by Vladimir Putin. We want there to be peace talks. We want this conflict to end, but it's quite right that we should support Ukraine. I don't know the answer to that particular question, however.
Let me just push on that. I appreciate it's off brief for you and appreciate I know all the details, but is there a risk that Britain gets sucked into this more than perhaps the electorate would be comfortable with?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on something when I don't know what the facts were in that particular case. I do know that the people of this country and the government of this country want to stand foursquare alongside Ukraine. We need those peace talks to happen. We need peace to happen in that region. We can't allow Russia to be getting away with invading any more countries.
Steve Reed joining us from the seaside in Portsmouth. I appreciate it's not swimmable this morning, but one day maybe we'll see you get in there when it's cleaned up.